Welcome. This is Eric from rulethewasteland.com. Today I actually have a topic prepared. Normally I just come on here last minute, forget it's even Sunday at 6 p.m. Pacific, and barely know what to talk about. But this time are going to talk about the idea of gold revaluation, what that really means, what it could mean, and all the potential outcomes of that. Very interesting situation. Um, Simply because of the fact that it's even being talked about, I guess, is really what's most significant to me. What's up, guys? Let me know. Obviously, I assume you can hear me and see me okay. Appreciate it. Mr. Landfill says 5 by 5. So, like I've always mentioned before, that even these original prepping books, like the Mel Tappan books in the 70s, reference the debt and stuff like that, and how we know that ever since went away from a sound money standard into this debt-based fiat system that especially once we completely got off the gold standard, that it was destined to return to its, inherent intrinsic value eventually, which is nothing. But that was still a generation or two ago. You know what I mean? Like the Federal Reserve was created in 1913. That was 120 years ago. Well, not 120, 110 years ago. Um, Even when and we still maintained some semblance of a gold standard until the 70s, early 70s, 71, I think, which still 55 years ago. CLM says I got a fever and the only cure is more Doge Bell. Yeah, I mean, that is interesting. I mentioned to you guys, and we'll get into the gold topic here once a few more people show up. I told you guys days leading up to the election that Trump was not perfect. Um, then there's a few specific things that he has gotten wrong in the past, and we can hopefully learn from some of his other mistakes, but that there is just no contest that we need to support him. I don't buy into that everything is controlled by the deep state and they're just tricking us against controlled opposition. And I think the stuff that's happened in the last 2 weeks is a perfect example of that. Like they are, to the extent that there is a monolithic deep state, they are on their heels. I don't buy for a second that all this slashing of their dark money funding and everything and firing of massive amounts of federal employees is just what the deep state would want and is tricking us. You know what I mean? So yes, Trump is still gargling Israel's balls. I still am suspicious of everything to do with the monetary system and the economy. But like we're talking about today, there are things being mentioned. They are specifically talking about letting Ron Paul audit the Federal Reserve. Like, do you think that they would be talking about that if Trump had lost this election? Do you think there would be even a consideration that we would be even talking about any of these different outcomes of gold revaluation that I'm going to be talking about if Trump hadn't got elected? So, not to get into politics, but obviously we would be in a different situation. Um, and most of the stuff I think is setting us up to better survive what's coming. What is coming? Economic turmoil, regardless, one way or the other. That's the things I've been saying for months. There are certain realities of the situation that we've got ourselves in. When you are in a pit, the only things that you can do are climb out of it, help out of it, or die in the bottom of the pit. There is no situation where you just sit there and wait and all of a sudden you're not in the pit anymore. So there are certain realities of the situation that we're in that no matter who we got, Ron Paul himself could be president, Peter Schiff, whoever else you think would be, Gregory Manarino, whoever would be the best president slash uh, Secretary of the Treasury, it wouldn't matter. There's certain pains that we would have to go through to unwind this stuff, even if you do it the right way. Now, the question is Trump going to do it the right way? Probably not to 100%. So we're going to have even more pain than we would probably necessarily need to long term under the best possible scenarios, but there are no possible scenarios where we get out of this unscathed. The only thing we can hope is that enough of the right things are being done that we eventually come out stronger or at least alive without uh economic dirt nap scenario. But yeah, I'm definitely on Team Trump, and I have to admit the things that we've been seeing, it's been only less than a month, and shocking. They've done a lot more than I actually thought they were going to do in terms of uncovering a bunch of this nonsense, slashing spending, deportations, all that stuff. It's actually being done. He seems to have learned from his mistakes quite well. But like I said, we still got some crazy economic stuff coming up, and one of the things that they've been talking about is this gold evaluation. So we're going to get into all that in just a second. What I want to point out, the Patreon, last month, there were two winners. I hadn't even updated my roles. One of the people who won had actually canceled their subscription. So we have an additional prize. which is another one of the green one of these. Ed took the gunmetal kind of olive drab colored one. So we still have one of these brand new Kong cases, which is going to be given away. We still have the Revo knife, and this is the Ness shape, the Ness knife, which is a really cool kind of. It's not really a sheep's foot, but it's like a nice big belly on that. Really cool knife. We also have that's the second prize. The third prize is this really cool. It's not assisted opening, but I mean, it's got the lever. The M390 Invictus Blades, I think it's called. I have the link in the after the show. And then I'm also going to throw in a fourth winner, which is 25 entries into March's drawing. So regardless of which tier you're in, as long as you stay in through March as well, you will have 25 additional entries in the March's drawing. So four winners will be chosen in the first live stream in March. I think there's only 10 people in the Patreon. So jump on the Patreon World of Wasteland and you have a pretty good shot at winning a prize. All right. So gold revaluation. Watching a lot of videos on this. High Desert Pioneer had a good video I watched on this. His concern mostly is obviously that a lot of this stuff is not subterfuge, but part of the plan to try and get us into some sort of digital currency or something, and that's certainly possible. I'm very worried about that. We have seen Trump say overtly that he's against CBDC, but he's very pro crypto, so he might still, even inadvertently, he might be pro making decisions that get us on a path that 8, 12 years in the future, we could be locked into a CBDC. And even if it's, and I'll get into, I guess I'll just cover this one now. One of the possible outcomes of this is that we would think that returning to a sound money is good, and it would be in a lot of ways. But if that sound money, even if it's like, let's say we go to 100% gold backed dollar sound money, but it's still all digital, like it's still a blockchain, there is no physical cash, they still have the same opportunity to unperson or undebank everyone as they would if it was just the current Federal Reserve notes or any other sort of CBDC. Now they lose a lot of other shenanigan type things that they could do about like negative interest rate and like all this other shit that they could put on it probably wouldn't apply nearly as much, would be a lot more difficult to implement than uh, if you had a gold backed or commodity backed, especially if it was one that you could actually redeem. But there, if most of the system adopts a digital implementation of this, even if it's physical gold that's backing it, a lot of those problems are still present, or at least potentially present. Even if Trump doesn't do it, like I said, next president might decide to do it and just click, 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 ratchet along towards fewer options. Same way we've seen with something like physical cars and like these stupid phones where everything is tied in now. Now you can't even get cars without certain features unless you keep them limping along. And even then, they have smog checks and all these other things. And they're doing the same with IDs. And now it has to be real ID. And eventually, it'll be digital biometric stuff because even if there's a few holdouts, crazy people like me, then they're eventually just going to have enough of the population to do it and say, well, you can't fly anymore, or you can't get your Social Security benefits anymore, or any of these other things that are, they'll start with the things that they say are privileges, like driving. But so going into any sort of digital stuff is bad. But in general, talking about gold monetization is interesting because even the talk brings up the relationship between the dollar and gold, which is not good for the dollar. Obviously, the more people realize, and most people don't even realize, if like they said, the process by which money is created is so simple, the mind is repelled. And if the average person knew the truth about the money banking system, there'd be a revolution overnight. So talking about it obviously raises the risk of more people realizing like what the hell is actually going on, just how bad things are, and the like. But so that's a good thing in my mind that these things are talked about in even a potentially favorable light. It means that they are at least more of a chance that we will move in somewhat of the correct direction, moving away from this debt-based fiat into some sort of partially sound money system. But there's a lot of confusion out there too. I think that confusion is used on purpose by some people. It's used unknowingly by others. You see talking heads talking about like the whole term gold revaluation. Some people seem to think that the government's just going to come out and say gold is X amount of dollars now, which they can't really do that. The only couple options they have. So for those of you who aren't at all clued into what the situation is, since 1971, there is no direct relationship between gold and the dollar. Nixon ended, I think it was like 40% backed at the time, something like that. But officially took us off the gold standard. So there's no amount of redeemability or no amount of dollars officially backed by gold. It is purely fiat debt-based system, and the amount of dollars is controlled by just the amount of lending, interest rates, that sort of thing. In fact, most of the dollars created happen in retail level, people mortgages, loans and things, creating dollars, loaning dollars into existence. So we have no official relationship between the dollar and gold. What we do have, allegedly, is a few 100 million ounces of gold on the Treasury's, balance sheets in Fort Knox. Now, you can get into whether that's actually there or not. I don't know. It doesn't really matter for the purposes of what I'm saying right now. But officially, they have 260-ish million ounces on the Treasury owns of gold. But for stupid reasons, it's in their spreadsheet for the same reasons that they have retirement papers in these weird caves that people have to drive tricycles around to pick up. They don't update their holdings, so it's on the books at $42 or $43 an ounce, whatever it was when it was initially entered in there or last entered in when we took off the gold standard or whatever. So if you just like when I have a spreadsheet in my house and I say, how many ounces of silver do I have? What's the spot price? And it instantly calculates what this is currently worth. Government doesn't do that. And their records, the official records of the largest economy in the world, the most technologically advanced probably in the history of humankind, doesn't have an updated spreadsheet. And it's supposedly some big thing for them to what's called mark to market or say, let's go in and change our records to actually show what we have on the balance sheet. And, it could cause all sorts of adjustments to have to be made if we just actually wrote down what this was actually worth. So one of the things that they're talking about revaluing is even though everyone knows how much gold the Treasury says they have, even though we all know how much gold is actually worth, it's supposedly meaningful to them to officially write down in the books what that would be worth today. So it's really stupid and very much a indictment of our current financial system and the way governments do accounting that's even meaningful at all. That officially writing down that this is now worth 750 billion, I think it would be at today's prices, as opposed to a few 11 billion or whatever. Um, that's like meaningful and that would give more options. Like, doesn't everyone know exactly how, like, you say how much gold you have? 5 seconds on Google, you can see what gold is worth. Why would them making this official change anything? Very stupid. But that's how the government works. Just in the same way they can say, oh, we cut our spending because we were going to increase our spending by 50 billion, but now we only increased it by 10 billion. So we cut our spending by 40 billion because we didn't increase it as much as we were maybe thinking about doing. Stupid shit like that, stuff that you could never do in a real business, stuff that me and you, like, I sell couple thousand fishing kits on Amazon and I can't do accounting and stuff like this. But with their billions of dollars, they can just not update. And that's like matters. So most of the time, that's what referring to when talking about revaluing the gold is just taking their treasury balance sheet, mark to market, officially coming out with an asset line of the 700 or 800 billion in gold, which apparently gives them more options. Now, that does not include what most people are talking about, putting any sort of official gold backing back on the dollar or setting or revaluing the price of gold. And that's what a lot of people seem to think is the government has no mechanism for coming out and setting the price of gold. Because it's set by the international markets, just like they couldn't decide what the price of oil is. They can decide like at what price you want to buy or sell it at, but there's still an international market for this. So if the government came out and said gold is now $5,000 an ounce, that doesn't mean anything unless they are backing the dollar with enough amount of gold to make that exactly happen. And they could do that. That is one of the things that they could do is they could eventually return to a dollar backing to give us somewhat of the real currency. And I did the math on some of these. So with the current M2 money supply, to get a you would need 840 million ounces of gold to get to a 40% backing and keep the price at $10,000 an ounce. So that's already almost four times, it's over three times what the amount of gold that they have. So even if they had three times as much gold and only 40% back the dollar, the price of gold would still go to 10K just to make that even. Um, at a 40% backing at the current amount of gold, like if they said, okay, we have our 260 trillion and they really have it all, and we're going to go to 40% backing like we were back in the day, gold would still be at $32,000 an ounce. Um, that's nice. I'll take that, but it would cause a lot of problems in the meantime too, because it kind of like I was saying, admitting where the worth of dollar actually is when compared to the amount of gold that's in the system. That would be very beneficial for countries that had a lot of gold, but potentially bad. In some ways, some people were talking about how China, if you're an export economy, having a really strong currency messes with that system. To get it full backing with the current amount of gold that the Treasury has, they said we're 100% backed by gold. And so all the dollars out there are now backed by the amount of gold that we have. The math for that works out to $80,000 an ounce of gold if they really have $260,000 an ounce and they don't have more, don't have less. So if they decide to go, you know what, our dollar is now, every dollar out there is now backed by this amount of gold that we have, the 260 million ounces, then gold is effectively $80,000 an ounce. And that would cause all sorts of problems. And also, it's unclear how that would play out in a system where the amount of dollars in the system is not strictly controlled by the government, even by the Fed. Even when they set interest rates, that's not really what, strictly speaking, controls the amount. There is an uncapped limit, to the amount of money that can be created if these institutions and everything, can loan out money, people taking mortgages, that like you can affect it, but you can't strictly control it. So that would be really weird to, and not really workable to have that in a system where they have to keep buying more gold potentially if other people are controlling how much money is in the system. And then, yeah, so that's one of the things they could do. Now, some of the people are talking about what they could do is, now that if they revalue the gold, like they do the mark to market thing, nothing's really changed. The market price of gold hasn't changed. There's no amount of gold that you can get for your dollars. There's no backing. They just simply go in and say the Treasury actually has $800 billion, $700 billion worth of gold, and then doing sorts of, using that to just make their balance sheets look more solvent, look more liquid, or even come up with some sort of weird collateralized debt, or not collateralized debt, but collateralized instruments that are based on gold. So that, like, the dollar might be backed by gold, but they'll sell some new kind of bond that, because treasuries are getting, not looking good, or for whatever reason, they can make more money by selling other things like gold tickets or something, whatever you want to call it. There's a bond that is now backed by the gold. So they're in essence creating a gold backed instrument without having to make the currency gold back, just give them something else to sell. In effect, that's no really different than just selling the gold, with the exception that you just don't have to move it. It's kind of like selling paper gold, like all these instruments. There might be an interest rate attached to it or something like that. So it's just a more complicated way of selling the gold. So it's probably even just more bullshit. And they might even come up with some sort of novel um, financial instrument to obfuscate it a little more. But as far as I can tell, there hasn't been no serious discussions of them returning to a gold standard, but there are discussions, and I think that that's at least meaningful. Like I said, even having the president, secretary of treasury, um, Fed people, news people, even talking about the relationship between gold and the worthless US dollar, um, is good, and it shows that there's a potentially that we're on the right path. But like I said, they may use that fervor and that superficially, sound money system to get us into something like, yeah, we're going to go to a, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, a gold-backed crypto dollar. And everyone's like, it's gold-backed, it's sound money. But now it's a system that they still have to allow you to use the app and the log in, and they can still ban you from the system, or cut off your internet connection, or any of these other things that would make it very problematic. So that's what I'm kind of worried about. Um, but just want to go through all those different options. Do you guys have any Still, anything you don't understand about the gold back, let me know, or any points you wanted to make on that. But when it comes down to it, it's still just an abstraction. Anything they do is just an abstraction away from physical wealth. And you want to get the real thing. We've talked about this before. You know what this is. Fucking stardust. Some of the oldest heavy elements in the universe. They can't get away from that. No machinations they can do will prevent eventually every fiat currency realizing its true value. Let's see what we got in the chat. All right, roses are Destiny says roses are red, violets are blue. Break into my country and I deport you. She says it's time to sell your broken gold jewelry and trade the cash for gold coins. Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with having a little bit of everything in terms of gold, as long as you are on your own balance sheet, effectively keeping track of the value of that broken jewelry as simply melt value and not pretending like it's worth more than just the gold content. Then there could be something to be said for keeping that gold jewelry. In fact, Fernando Fairfowl from who wrote Surviving the Economic Collapse in Argentina, he mentioned that it was a lot easier and less dangerous to sell broke pieces of broken jewelry. Like if you show up with a couple links from a necklace, that's gives you puts a lot less of a target on your back than showing up with a couple gold bullion because people think like, oh, you might be a collector. Whereas if you just have some broken jewelry, they think, everyone has a little bit of jewelry. You cashing in your mom's or grandma's jewelry out of desperation. It's easy to take it apart in small pieces, that sort of thing. So unless it's really awkward in some way, or you think you can get more than in bullion than you could in some other thing, I don't think that there's any reason that you would need to necessarily sell the broken gold jewelry now. Any good references to educate about cryptocurrency? Not really. I am not a crypto guy. I know the very basics. I'm not the person to tell you. Just be careful. There was a massive, apparently even Javier Milei or whatever from Argentina did like a massive rug pull of some meme coin. Get Trump creating meme coins, which wasn't quite a rug pull, but obviously the no meme coin is just worth money years later unless it gets some sort of spike in popularity for whatever reason. So bad idea to get involved in any of the meme coin nonsense in my mind. Um, if you want to get into crypto, I would stick with the big ones. Edward says, some people think silver has more upside potential than gold. Does anyone have an opinion? I think too, but it just depends because the traditional silver to gold ratio is out of whack. So it would seem that silver is undervalued. It also has a huge industrial component where it is needed and necessary and basically for all practical purposes used up to where it becomes almost impossible to recover at anything close to current prices. But I mean, if they officially make gold a monetary metal again, and any country, BRICS or US or anyone else, does back their currency with it, like we see, it could go up to 80,000, 100,000, 50, 100, 80, whatever. Massive increase. Would silver automatically go along with that? I mean, it would receive a bump, I think, for sure. But if it wasn't included in the currency, it wouldn't really necessarily go up to the same extent that gold would. And I think there's scenarios where they use gold and don't use silver. So in general, I think silver is vastly undervalued, and I don't think you're really at any risk. But I'm not a financial advisor of losing money in silver for sure, especially because regardless of what happens with the economy, there's always going to be that industrial need for silver. Is going to be increasingly more expensive to mine. It's going to basically be used up. The more we get into this high-tech electrical cars, photovoltaics, medical technology, all this stuff uses silver. Well, the world uses 10 times the silver than is now presently mined. Yeah, exactly. Like that huge industrial demand. So would that industrial demand alone be enough to maintain its current price or more? It just depends on how much is being mined, what the prices are, whatever. But I think silver has a lot going for it. I don't see any reason why you need to choose one or the other. I think that once you get to a certain point, silver becomes actually problematic to store and transport. So you want to, have beyond that, have some gold too, especially because, like I said, there are scenarios where gold might spike up and silver not necessarily nearly as much. Moonshine says the dollar used to be money when it was properly backed. Now it's simply currency. Money can be both currency and money, but currency is not money. Yeah, exactly. You can have currency, but I don't necessarily buy into this. Like, so there's some people like Rafi Farber and others that have like an actual religious view on like gold is money, and it certainly is one of the best monies. But the actual wealth, when you talk about from economic sense, is the earth's scarce resources. And something like silver in that sense is much more valuable than gold because we can't do nearly as much with gold. There isn't as much of it. Silver works better. It's the most conductive metal, that sort of thing. So, in most practical purposes, silver is better than gold, but gold's unique properties make it very well suited to use as money, but it still isn't something like the intrinsic value of gold is just that it suits that purpose very well. If gold disappeared from the planet, it's not like there would be no way to have an economy or to have money. You could use gold, you could use copper, you could use digital things that are backed by oil or land or any other sort of commodity and still be sound money. So gold just does a really good job of it, but I don't buy that there's a universal diktat, you know, that gold is money and it's the only thing that is money. I think that what we need to focus on is that the resources that human beings want and need, and anything beyond that is an abstraction used to represent them. So that when gold is used as money, it is still just representing other things. People aren't, getting the gold coins because they need the gold. They're using the gold coins to represent and for price discovery of other things. That's the most important thing that money can really do is a price discovery because you can store your wealth in anything that has good longevity as long as you have a means to price discovery. And gold isn't the only thing that can do that. It's really good at it, and it functions for the actual transactive physical properties, what you need for money, very, very well, better than most things, being divisible, being irreproducible, being relatively rare, that sort of thing. But in modern times, you could get away with having a mostly digital, mostly paper, whatever currency that is just represented by real commodities that you don't actually physically have to transact in because it's giving you that price discovery. And like even when I go on a Facebook group, I flip storage units, I'll buy a storage unit, sell the contents, and a lot of times for the smaller items, I will just trade for a buy sell group. And so even when you're doing barter, one of the things that really happens often in these groups is people will be like, "What's the trade value of that?" And it still has to come back to some sort of money. So, and we'll be like, so the group you're only allowed to trade in like some of these groups you can't actually sell it but you still have to put a trade value and that's going to be in dollars. So like I'm selling this fan, I want $10 in trade value and someone else will be like, well, here I have this set of dumbbells, these are $30 in trade value, can you throw something else in? So you don't actually have, and the gold kind of functions in that same way, like it needs, or money rather, doesn't have to be gold, but you need something out there that can function as that standard. I think other things can obviously do that as gold. Gold just does it extremely well. It's the best thing that we have, but it's not the only thing that can function like that. Destiny says, I've gone through 10,000 pennies this weekend while watching TV and pulling out the copper ones. Yeah, you can do that. Prices decided by market participants, whoever they may be. Exactly. Mid 1982, when they changed pennies, I have a jar for the copper ones. Yep, yep. He keep mispronouncing Bitcoin. Who? Yeah, I sort out the 82s and weigh that. Okay, nickels are 75% copper. Not anymore, right? I think they're like mostly zinc now. Everything is adulterated. Let's ask Grok. What is the current composition of a U.S. nickel coin? Stinking. Oh, you're right, 75% copper. I thought they changed that. So 75% copper, 25% nickel, but they are 5 cents. So it's not more expensive, I guess, to make them. I think that's worth a melt value. What is the aren't AR amped? Oh, what is the amount of gold on paper versus the amount of actual gold on the planet? It's not the same. Yeah. So I mean, the amount of gold that is being traded or that exists based on the IOUs that people are selling for gold is way more, and that's one of the things that could potentially explode. And we're seeing weird movements with the COMEX right now, um, where people are more and more asking for physical delivery recognized, and that's one of the side effects of this conversation. Talking about gold is people are going to realize these things. So it's apparently especially bad with silver. I've heard everything from, you know, 50 to 1 and upwards of how much paper physical there is versus so how many claims there are to each ounce of gold that is supposedly out there is anywhere from dozens to hundreds of times as many people own gold as there is actually gold to be owned. It's a really bad situation. Obviously, same sort of thing that happens in a bank run. And exactly why I was talking about the idea of having a physical or a officially gold-backed currency or commodity-backed currency doesn't prevent them from doing shenanigans. Like these things are literally they are selling ownership of gold and they're selling more than the gold they have. So, and that's what could be done with any sort of digital currency even more easily. To be properly backed, you would need to be able to walk into a bank and have an immediate exchange rate back and forth. Otherwise, I'm not sure how well it's backed. Exactly. And that's what happens every time. And that's what will happen in the future. And in my opinion, that is one of the big reasons I feel like we are extremely unlikely to get a strictly only gold backed currency and not some sort of commodity backed currency. Because if they make this thing that's saying we're 100% backed in oil and gold and the country's wheat supply, and they throw all these things in it, and everyone just trusts it and say, like, yeah, sure, you can go collect your wheat, but to actually physically cash it out would be technically impossible for the average person to get like take your $1 or even your $100 and go say, yeah, I'm going to get my 5% of this in wheat, 5% in crude oil, 1% in gold, and whatever. And it allow them to do a lot more shenanigans while still saying that it is backed. And they can say, oh, well, this wheat is moving, so you can take it in oil this time, if any, you know what I mean? So I seriously doubt they're going to give up their ability to participate in those kind of shenanigans until they absolutely have to. So if they voluntarily go into a commodity backed currency, that would be one of the main reasons why, in my opinion, is to allow themselves that kind of flexibility. Whereas I think the only chance we get of having a true sound money is things would have to collapse badly first, which I don't want that. So we'll see how it plays out. To be probably, yeah. Destiny says they have a large mint mark. Okay, I think gold necklaces with links that could be removed and used as currency existed all the way back to the times of Christ. Yeah, it's a good idea. Obviously, just carry things around soft enough, especially back then with pure gold. Gonna buy a storage shed for my silver. Hell yeah! What's up, HCP? I think I am officially. Let me see something. What do I? No, I'm not quite at body weight. I'm approaching within a couple of years. Hopefully, I'll have my own body weight in silver, but I'm not quite there yet. I guess I could make that happen by going full on machinist, like Christian Bale in The Machinist, cutting weight to get down there. But I have a lot, and it's the point where it's problematic to think about moving and storing things, and I want to get some more gold. Woo woo, what's up? Maybe the weight of silver is a plus in a weird way. It depends. Feels cool. It sure is easier to hold a beefy bar like this made out of silver than it is gold. Because 1 kilogram worth of gold, unfortunately, although it is my birthday month and you guys can send me stuff, my PO box will be in the description. It's a little bit outside my price range to have a kilogram of gold. 1,000 grams. What's a gram of gold these days? 60 something dollars more? I don't know. Revaluing gold at that pace would probably start a war somewhere. It would definitely cause a lot of perturbations in the global economy and stuff that you wouldn't even necessarily expect too. Because like I said, even like China, which has a bunch of gold, it would cause some weirdness for them because now their currency, if they decided to back it, like they would have a bunch of this money, but all of their stuff would be expensive to a lot of these other countries that buy it. So it might mess up their trade um, uh, their balance of trade, because they export a lot, and the government having a bunch of money wouldn't necessarily mean that a random manufacturer would become wealthy because of it. Yeah, Zach says they should make pennies out of paper like the dollar, but smaller, and it wouldn't be worth counterfeiting because of low value. I don't like the idea of getting rid of the pennies. Like, anything to take away like that, that's just treating a symptom. Like, why is a penny worthless? Because you're fucking up our money and inflating it into nothingness. Don't take away the cash just because just basing the currency. Fix the problem. And anything that takes us away from being able to use cash and just have, basic real system like that is a bad thing. So I don't like it's not a good thing. It's arbitrary that the money's worth more than it costs to produce it. A penny's around forever. Who gives a fuck if it costs 1 cent, 2 cents, half a cent? Like, that's irrelevant for the most part. Um, Pennies can last for decades. Um, there's only a fraction of the money out there is represented in physical cash. We don't have to make a penny to represent every or any certain amount. So stop fucking up the money. And why does it matter if it's half a cent or 3 cents to make a penny? Just make the fucking pennies. We saved some money on, trans poodles in Thailand or whatever, making sure that they can go to college. So use that money to just make sure our money system can still work the way it's supposed to. Ammo is cheap and plentiful right now. I think that might be a great investment. I was just going to think about making a video about that. Like, we are probably likely to see some deals on weapons and ammo over the next few years that we may never see again, especially if everything starts to go disruptive economically. So I definitely would not slow down on picking up any sort of Second Amendment related implements, ammo, reloading supplies, that sort of thing. Just like the pennies, ammo can last for decades, especially if you store it well. Modern ammo, stuff like rimfire and shotgun shells won't necessarily last quite as long, but if you have them in sealed properly, they can still last a long ass time. And like I said early on in this live stream, Trump could do everything right when it comes to the economy. He's probably not even going to, but even if he did, we're going to go through some turmoil. And some of these raw materials may become very expensive. We already know there was a conscious effort on previous administration's part to make it more difficult to produce ammo in the United States, shutting down all these lead smelting plants and stuff like that. So that whenever we can get access to this stuff, especially if you use or do any sort of recreational shooting, um, just do the math. If you say, I know I'm going to shoot X thousands of rounds a year of 9 mil or 5.56 or whatever. I plan on shooting into my 80s, whatever. I'm going to need X amount of rounds. They're not going to be any cheaper than they are today, at least not for probably 15 or 20 years. Then maybe something could happen to where new technology revolutionaries our manufacture and mining base or whatever, population of the world collapses, something like that. But it's extremely unlikely that it will become drastically more cheaper. um, so just get as much as you can. What if, Krakatoa says, they audit Fort Knox and they find little to nothing? What happens then? Well, then their balance sheet goes even crappier. Even though the gold, like I said, at the current value, officially on their balance sheet, it's only at like 8 or 11 billion or something. But like I said, everyone knows how much gold they say they have. Everyone knows what gold is actually worth. So everyone assumes the Fed has this, $800 billion worth of gold. So if they officially audit it and find out that it's not there, then, well, that's, 1,000 tons or whatever, 260 million ounces that have just disappeared from the global market. Brings into question everything else these institutions say, which we know is all lies. So it probably would be a good thing in the long term, but it would cause a whole lot of chaos in the short term, and everything else would want to be audited immediately. The COMEX probably, other central banks, other country central banks, gold holdings, things like that would probably no one would trust them without auditing. Any sort of instruments or promissory notes or anything else that was based on that gold is now, evaporated. So it would be pretty significant, but I do think it would be good. And it needs to happen, obviously. No chance on revalued gold by the US. Yeah, I don't, like I said, I think there's an extremely low chance of dollar getting a gold backing without first collapsing. The revaluing that I was talking about, like the mark to market thing, sure, they'll do that because it's meaningless. I have a long way to get to my body weight. Yeah, I'm not that heavy, like I said. I'm victim weight, as they say, unfortunately. Luckily, I'm not also short. I'm king of the manlets at like 5'10" and a half. I can get things like easily off the middle shelf, but I'm not a big, especially with my wasted away. I'm starting to get back into it, working out again. But after my spine surgery, I kind of wasted away. I looked like David Hogg there for a few months. Pathetic, terrible. So I'm definitely still well into victim weight territory, even when I'm in shape. I think my heaviest weight I ever got was in the 180s, and that was flabbiness. Um, if I'm actually in shape, I would have to if I'm staying under like 15% body fat, I would be insanely jacked to be like 180. Like right now, I think I weigh 160, so that's doable. Still a lot of silver. Emergency survival tip says prepper mode engage. That's more like it. Destiny says picked up 5 cans of BMG Korean War vintage. Shoots fine. Awesome. Speaking of which, I forgot to mention this. I have or not me, but it's my birthday month, and I still want a Barrett 50 cal and classic firearms. They tease me with this saying, of course, I'm not going to win, but if you guys would enter, I'm going to put this in the chat contest, and I'll put it in the description below as well. If you guys could just enter that for me as a birthday present, I get some extra entries, and you get a chance to win this $15,000 gun too, because none of us want to have to ask the Alphabet Boys if they have level 4 plates. And one easy way to do that is to have a Barrett, because then it doesn't matter. More achievable goal, freeze your body weight in meat. That I have accomplished. I absolutely have more than my body weight, I think. Actually, I can't say absolutely. I bet I do. I have two chest freezers, mostly full. Um, I should add that up. I guarantee you I'm well over 100 pounds. Because even these packs of bacon I get, these 3 pound packs, I got to have like 20 of those. And then I have a bunch of other stuff. So I'm probably pretty damn close to body weight in frozen meat. SBQR says if we get closer to the Fort Knox audit, we notice price of gold surging. That could indicate a lot. Yeah, and I mean, we've seen a lot of gold coming back into New York, moving from COMEX to New York, and people like Rafi Farber and Maneko 64 and a lot of these gold commentary channels I don't really know what to make of it. And this is one possibility that there's a lot of backdoor stuff going on to not repatriate, but to get gold into the United States so that we can officially match up to the numbers that we say we have. You know what I mean? So there could be all sorts of maybe who knows what all these um, people have all those opinions about these tariff deals and how Trump stopped it. And, some people like Canadian Prepper think that Trump like folded. A lot of other people think that the other team, like, haha, Trump got what he wanted immediately. My guess is that none of the stuff that we're hearing about is the real reason from either side. And it's weird, either military funding or stuff like this in the background. Who knows what kind of background deals were made? Like, in terms of moving gold, in terms of military aid or lack thereof, or just everything else. So that's in my mind more of what was happening with the tariff deals and them ending was, could be stuff like that, that they realize they're going to go in this direction, or they realize the world's going in this direction, and they need to have their ducks in a row in that sense. So that's certainly a possibility. Desolator says, Edward, bro, the gang's all here. Yeah, glad you guys could make it. Did you say freeze dry? The wife's waiting me. Wait, is that more? This is America after all, I guess. David Hogg could never pull off the hair. Absolutely could not. And as far as I know, pretty sure he is like already having legal trouble. He like became the vice chair for the DNC or something, or one of the organizations. I think it was a DNC, and he's already has like accusations, if not outright charges, of mishandling the money and like grifting, embezzling of some kind. Like 2 weeks in, hilarious, hilarious. I could. I've never even seen a barbell. Disgusting. It's like goddamn disgraced. You have a Barrett suppressed? That is fucking awesome. I don't hate you. That I'm jelly. I'm lime green jelly, as the kids say, but um, definitely no hate. That is badass. Yeah, and it is like $8 or $10 around, unfortunately. But you don't have to fire too many if you have good aim. You $3 for ball rounds. That's awesome. And that's one of the ones where it definitely makes sense to reload, or at least sell your casings to someone who does. It's quite a bit of brass. We're supposed to own 8 tons. Yeah, I think it works out to like 260 million ounces or whatever. But SSP loves payment in gold. That's awesome. Try to hold on to your gold though. But yeah, so that's why. What do you guys think? Let me know what you guys think about the gold situation. If it's all bluster, if it's trying to really move towards sound money, if it's kind of the some hand waving, um, like we're some of us are afraid of to try and get us into. Like I said, maybe they'll use it as a Trojan horse to get us into uh, digital currency of sorts, or even electronic. It's not. It doesn't have to be a CBDC to have a lot of those same problems, like I mentioned. Like a CBDC, a central bank digital currency, like a purely digital version of just fiat currency, is the worst possible outcome because it has all the negative downsides of the current monetary system without any of the benefits. It has all sorts of new problems and powers that they can use. New York getting all the gold. Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the weird things. And it could be related to them planning or just expecting, all this talk about like BRICS is weak and all this. Like if they know that a lot of other, well, maybe they're trying to pull the rug out from under BRICS by doing it first. That's what I hope is something like that. That's the sort of thing that if we can really move to any sort of sound money system, even just partial again, it could really fix a lot of things for the better, but it will cause a lot of turmoil regardless. Revalue to 1 ounce can buy a Barrett in 50 to 500 rounds. Yeah, I mean that would be about almost 20,000, right? Somewhere between 15 and $20,000 an ounce. I don't know how many Barretts are out there. I know Palmetto State is supposedly making a 50 BMG rifle that will be somewhere around $3,000, I think, for us poors. But I may just save my bucks and get the real thing one day when I win one of these poker tournaments. No one in the West is going to push a gold-backed currency. It would take enormous power out of their hands. Who would ever do that to themselves? Exactly. That's been my contention, is that for that to happen, it would have to be post a massive uncontrolled collapse where they have zero opportunity to introduce a new currency because their credibility is absolutely gone. No one's just going to use their new money, and they would have to say, all right, look, this has actual gold backing it. So, you know, that's the only way that would happen. And since these people are unfortunately, I don't know if it's good or bad that they're not as retarded as they sometimes seem. They know at least some of these things as well. They can see some of these things coming. So they're probably going to try and head it off and choose the option that still gives them the opportunity to do a little bit of shenanigans. And in my mind, the combination of that is a basket of commodities because, like I said, it really prevents people from executing the trade in if it's oil and mixed with other things because you're not going to go be like, oh yeah, I'm worried about what the government's doing, so let me collect my $50,000 in crude oil and show up with a tanker or whatever. It would be diffuse in terms of where it is and all this other stuff, so it would give them a big opportunity. It would still be an improvement that there was any sort of commodity backing. It would limit the shenanigans to some extent, but it wouldn't prevent them from doing all of them. So I think that's what we're most likely to see, and that's what the BRICS will be doing too, probably. So the BRICS isn't some savior that they're going to come in and fix the global monetary system. Um, Krakatoa is saying there's no gold, but crypto is the way to go would be a Trojan horse. Yeah, I mean, but like I said, it would be harder for them to do that than it would be for them to do a combination and saying like, you know what? all you libertarians are right, we're going gold backed. This is a gold backed digital dollar. And there's no real reason why that would be fundamentally different than a gold backed paper dollar, with the exception of is a lot more bottlenecks and gatekeeping that could be done. You could make it 100%, like you could make it for all practical intents and purposes a true sound money, but if it's digital, that still gives them the opportunity to cut you off or to eventually add other restrictions or eventually slowly reduce the percentage backing like they did with the real dollar and then move into a CBDC once everyone's already using a purely digital form. Um, so that's kind of what I'm worried about. If they just come out and say there's no gold, but now use the second fake money that we've came up with, after everyone just figuring out that not only is the US dollar trash, but it's even worse than you ever thought because we don't even really have the gold. I don't think that would work as well. There's scenarios where they could try to force people to using it, but like I said, that would be fraught with a lot more problems than offering a solution that supposedly makes, fixes the problem and still allows them to do a lot of that shenanigans. That's what I'm worried about. So we'll see. I just don't see BRICS as a threat, Edward says. China and India do not get along, so how can they have a great trading relationship? It just depends. I mean, like I said, it isn't about that it being better than the situation that we've been using for 20 years. It's about when that system fails, anything else usable is obviously going to be a better alternative. And to some extent, just like we've seen in the US, when people have reason to distrust a system, it can actually operate a lot more securely than when people are like, oh, there's nothing to worry about, like Social Security or the FDIC, like adding these supposed reasons that you don't have to worry actually create an environment where fraud and all sorts of other problems foster. Whereas if you get into a relationship where you don't trust a person, there's probably going to be a lot more due diligence. There's going to be a lot more people requiring proof of these asset backing, audits, and anything like that. And would they fake that stuff? Sure, they would. They could, or they might. But like I said, the distrust and inherent dealings with other countries that you would need in a system like that could actually, at least initially, make it force it to be more robust, or it can't exist than it would be as if uh, than what we're currently seeing. Emergency survival tips says I'm 10,000 this year just attacking the AP states on slot machines. Much easier than poker tournaments. Hell yeah, man. That's awesome. My suppressor is the size of a newborn child. Even my suppressors are muzzle brake. That's badass. Zach says I've stacked several sats. Satoshis are the future. I hope so. Or I don't really care one or the other. I just hope it's not end up being a big problem. Like I said, I'm not a crypto guy. I do think that when we see a if slash when we see a currency crisis where if they don't do any of this stuff first, if people are smart and stalwart enough to people like Trump to realize what's happening and to try to get into sound money before we have a problem, then this might not happen. But if they let it progress to where, or if some black swan happens and we actually see people fleeing the debt market and the global fiat system before there's an alternative and it just blows up, then naturally a ton of money is going to flow into crypto. But that doesn't mean that it's necessarily automatically going to be a great thing for every situation or going to be here in 50 years. Someone said they didn't think Bitcoin would be here in 15 years. I think it probably still will be. That's my guess. Well, what do you think about getting rid of the penny? I addressed that actually a few minutes ago. If you want to go back and listen, the short answer is I think it's bad. Anything getting rid of cash is not bad. It's irrelevant whether it costs half a penny, 1 penny, or 3 pennies to produce because they last for decades. They're only representing, it's built for a certain purpose, um, to represent a small fraction of the money that's in existence. And the problem only exists because they are debasing our currency to begin with. And so don't fucking take away the penny. Stop inflating the currency and making it worthless, worth less than the money it actually, or than the resources it actually takes to represent it in physical form. So I don't like it. And it's just addressing a symptom of the problem, not at all addressing the problem. So appreciate you guys watching. I smell some bacon cooking. I think I need to go eat it. But one of the winners from last month, if you guys missed it, was I hadn't updated. So they were no longer a member. So they weren't eligible. So we have 4 prizes for anyone who signs up for the Patreon. Link will be in the description before the end of this month. Um, we have the Kong case, the hypercolor green kind of pelican case deal. We have the Revo Nest knife. We have the Victus blade, and a fourth person will win 25 entries into the March contest if they stay a member for March. So whatever your tier you're currently in, your March chances will have 25 additional chances. So that the drawing for all 4 of those will be done on the first live stream of March. So I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for watching. And remember, this is real money, forged in the heart of a dying star. Its properties have no equal.